3iAtlas. We all have questions. What is it? Why aren't the space agencies talking about it? Do we still have to pay our rent? And is it going to save us from the apocalypse? So why am I talking about it? I've got a background in astrophysics, but I'm also a psychic medium. So I've been following the science. I've been looking at the different websites, trying to see what the updates are from the European Space Agency, from the NASA, etc. Been looking at videos by astrophysicists. But as a medium, I've also been able to tune in and connect with 3iAtlas. I connected with them last week and I posted a video. I posted a couple of longer videos on the Tube Review, but I also have a shorter one here. And so I just decided to reconnect today after also looking at some videos. So I think what's really interesting about this, there's a lot of things interesting about this, but one of the things that I find interesting is the fact that this is probably the biggest astronomical event that our astronomers and astrophysicists have ever had the chance to study in their lifetime. And yet, despite the fact that it's such a major kind of scientific event, there aren't press releases. There aren't pictures being released. There is not video footage from the telescopes. We know that several different arrays are all looking at this. We know that all over the world, there are telescopes looking at this. We know that on Mars, there are several different vehicles or telescopes or what have you, cameras looking at this thing. And despite that fact, we've only gotten one kind of blurry image from the European Space Agency. And it came out and it didn't look like a comet. They're calling it a comet. It did not look like a comet. It looked kind of symmetrical, it looked kind of like a square or, some other type of shape that's, artificially produced. And so then they came out right away and said, oh, these are just camera artifacts. This is just exposure. This is just blah, blah, blah. And the question that I have is, why wouldn't you be producing a whole bunch of images and footage for people to look at? Where are the press releases? Why aren't we talking about this? And yeah, I know the US government coincidentally had a shutdown at the same time that, 3iAtlas was passing right next to Mars, where our Mars rover could take pictures of it. And so I get that. But you know what? We're not the only kid in town. We're not the only game in town. There are lots of space agencies. There are lots of telescopes. Why are they being silent? They don't have government shutdown. So I was watching some videos yesterday by people and they're citing some sources, some actual papers. And I was like, great. But here's the thing. The papers that they were citing are all from like July, August. There's only one from October. And there's only this one image and this one video in the last like 6 weeks. So just from a purely logical point of view, this doesn't make sense. Something is up. There is something they're not sharing with us for some reason. Obviously, we don't know what that is or why it is. We can only speculate. But I believe in various sources of knowledge, right? We can get knowledge from empirical means like observing it, right, through a telescope. We can use logic. We can also use intuition. And so a lot of psychics, healers, light workers, dreaming people have also been tuning into 3iAtlas. And we're going to have to combine these different types of knowledge, right? As we move into the future, we're going to have to actually connect all of these types of information. We can't just say only the telescopes know or only the intuitives know. So I tuned into 3iAtlas today and I asked, the first question was, what are you? Because we were told it was a comet, doesn't quite have the features of a comet, doesn't have a tail, that's kind of a defining characteristic of a comet. And it also has like outgassing facing the sun, which also doesn't really make sense for a comet. Some people are calling it an asteroid. And so I asked this thing, what are you? Are you a comet? Are you an asteroid? And it said no. But what it said was it is a rock. It's made out of metal, at least part of it is made out of metal. And if we want to think of it as a large rock careening through space, that's okay. And they actually like us thinking that because we're not afraid of rocks, right? We're generally not afraid of comets. We are afraid of them when they get too close to Earth. We do have some, horror films about that. And of course, Halley's Comet was its own horror show back in the day, all of the fears about it. But generally, we're not really afraid of rocks careening through space, but we are afraid of aliens careening through space. And so they said, it's okay for us to see it as a rock. But they said what might help us if we understood it as a sentient rock, if we understood it as both organic and mineral. And I was able to merge my consciousness with it. And that's what I felt going into it. I felt the lattice structure of a crystal, a rock, a mineral. But then I also was shown structures that indicate this is like an organic being. It's kind of like our body. And so then I asked, well, is there anything else you are besides a rock that's conscious? They said, we're a multidimensional being, and you are only on Earth, you Earthlings, at least your scientists, are quite limited in what you can perceive. Because of the way you design your instruments, you only perceive three-dimensional objects that fall into that particular dimension that we call three. They said that's not really accurate, but what we call three-dimensional, our dimension, that's the only place we look. And they said, so you're seeing kind of a protrusion of who we are into 3D space. And they said it's kind of like if you're looking at an iceberg, and it's only a really small part of a glacier. And if you just look at the iceberg and think that's what you're looking at, you don't really know what you're looking at because most of the iceberg is under the water. So they said it's like that with multidimensional objects. If you're only looking at it through one dimension, you're only going to see one aspect of it. And so from this dimension, we see it as a rock careening through space. But, I also asked, well, what are the scientists seeing? Because whatever they're seeing, they're not sharing it with us. So, can you enlighten us as to why is that? So I asked them, is there any evidence that you are not just a rock careening through space, a comet, an asteroid? And they said, yes, there is lots of evidence which they have received already, and they already know that we are neither a comet nor an asteroid. And they gave an example of two kinds of evidence that they have, which lets them know that this is neither a comet nor an asteroid. One is something called a redshift, which they've picked up. So it's been a while since I studied astronomy, so I decided to look it up, and I got that a redshift is an increase in the wavelength or equivalently a decrease in the frequency and photon energy of electromagnetic radiation. And it also has to do with whether an object is moving away or towards us. And so there's something about the redshift of this object which lets them know this is neither a comet nor an asteroid. They also said the outgassing also gives it away that this is not a comet, because with a comet, they would expect outgassing in a particular way, especially as it relates to sublimation or how the comet is impacted by the sun. And they said that's not happening. They also said that with a comet, it's going to be decreasing in size as it kind of melts, kind of as it gets hotter and closer to the sun. I think it's called sublimation, where the ice, a comet is largely composed of ice, kind of starts to turn into gas. And what they said is this thing is not getting any smaller. It's not decreasing in size as it gets closer to the sun. It's not changing its size at all. And that it, in fact, the outgassing it's doing is not consistent with a comet. So they said, we outgas the same way that other organic beings do. They said, we're consuming things and then we're excreting them. And so as they go through space, they're consuming like space dust or comets or asteroids or whatever, and they're getting the nutrients they need, like, cadmium or tin or aluminum or whatever. And then they're excreting whatever elements they don't need. So the scientists would see that as outgassing. But the outgassing doesn't match what you would see with a comet. And a comet would not take in, it would only eject. Or at least that was their kind of simplified explanation. So I'm doing a much longer video over on the Tube of You, but I just wanted to, start to share some of what I got today here. Because beyond addressing my questions about what it is and what the scientists think it is and why they're acting the way they are, I also asked about how it relates to us, especially starseeds, and what we could be doing. So if you're tuning in and getting information, or if you have questions, please drop them in the comments, and let's explore this topic together.